Figures are a great way to bring a little diorama to life, but perhaps you're struggling with some ideas on how to complete them. Hello everyone, I'm Matt, this is Model Minutes, and join me on the workbench in this video as I explore some of the simple techniques I've been using to paint my figures for my recent dioramas. The first thing you're going to need are, of course, your figures. I've got some 3D printed ones which I purchased online. However, any kind of figure will do, be it injection molded, 3D printed, or sculpted by hand. The first step I'm going to do is give this a black base coat. I'm going to use this K Colors black primer. I'm airbrushing this onto all of my figures, however you could hand paint it, or if you have one, a rattle can will work just as well. I make sure that all of the figures are completely coated in this black paint and it's left to dry. Once this is done, I loaded some white paint into my airbrush and then I give this what's called a zenithal highlight. So what this is doing is simulating the sun shining down on the figures. This does work best if you're using an airbrush or a rattle can. And the aim here is to spray it from above, and the white paint catches on all of the raised areas as if the sun is shining on them, leaving all of the lower surfaces of the figures in a simulated shade. And once that is done, it looks something like this. These different areas of contrast are going to help with the next stages of painting in bringing out some of the details. So the first paint I'm going to use is something called a speed paint. If you're not familiar with these, in essence what they are a really thin kind of paint. It's not quite a wash and it's not like a normal acrylic, so it's sort of in between. And what this paint is particularly good at is giving an overall colour to your painted surface, but also running into all the recessed details and adding extra contrast and shade. This is pretty much a one coat kind of paint, and you should be getting the desired result from it. I used this speed paint on all of the fleshy areas of this figure. I tend to try and work in the same way that you would kind of get dressed as a person, so you start off with the skin and then you build up the different layers of the clothing, and that's what I'll do in this tutorial. Of course, if you don't have any speed paints or contrast paints as they're sometimes known, you could make your own kind of version by thinning down some acrylic paint and applying that in the same kind of way, which is actually what I'll do in the next step once I have picked out all of the fleshy parts of this figure. Moving on to the next layers of paint, what I'm going to do is thin down some other acrylic kinds of paint with the relevant thinner. You could use water or a specialist thinner, and I find either of them works, but all I'm doing is reducing the consistency of the paint to be something similar to that which was present in the contrast or speed paint I've just been using. This is then carefully applied onto the figure and should act in a similar kind of way, making sure I can get this done in pretty much one coat, but also leaving some of those highlights and contrasts that we applied with the zenithal prime. I will repeat this for the various different colours of this figure and simply build up the effect, working from the inner layers of clothing to the outer ones. It is probably worth making a point about the brush control, in that you may be painting the fine details with the tip of the brush, but typically you'll be using the side of the brush for the majority of the areas of your figure. Also, make sure you brace your hands so that you are reducing the amount of movement which your brush actually has available to it. This will ensure that you get fairly neat results with your paintbrush control. If you make any mistakes during the painting of your figure, don't worry though. It is fairly simple to wait for the paint to dry and then go back over the relevant area which needs the paint cleaned up. This figure is pretty much complete at this point, and don't forget you may have to go back and touch up various fine details if there are any present on your model. For now though, I think it's time to move on to some dry brushing. I've got this really light grey colour, and what I'm going to do is apply it to my paintbrush, and then, slightly counterintuitively, I'm going to remove all the paint again onto some paper towel. The reason for this is that I want the paintbrush to feel dry. I don't want it to feel particularly wet. The reason is there should be a residue left on your paint bristles, and when I brush my model with it, it should then catch in all of the raised and highlighted areas, adding further contrast. This of course leaves all of the recessed areas untouched, adding further shadow. And this is what the figure looks like at this point. Don't forget, you don't have to do this just for human figures. This process works equally well on animals as well. Ranging from the zenithal highlight over to speed paints or the thinned down paints as we've used previously, picking out various details and then dry brushing them towards the end. This wasn't a particularly complicated or time-consuming step, and I made fairly quick progress with these particular figures. The last thing I want to do with these figures is just make them blend in slightly with the diorama they're going to be applied to. So in this particular case, all of the lower areas of the figures, so around the boots for the person and the legs for the animals, these were given a coat of the same kind of brown mud colour which I used on the diorama just to help blend them in and appear as if they have actually been walking through the same kind of area. And with that now dry, the last thing to do is to install these figures on your chosen diorama. And that is pretty much it. My figures are now finished and installed on the diorama. They didn't take particularly long to do, and I only used some fairly simple techniques to complete them. And I think the results are fairly convincing. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments if you have any additional tips and what you think of these finished figures which I've installed in my diorama. These tips can be used across a variety of scales as well. What you've currently seen on screen here with the Land Rover, that is 1/43 scale, or otherwise O gauge for model railways. However, you can also do this on smaller scales and larger scales as well. Here for example is a 1/72 aircraft diorama where I used very similar techniques for those figures. Naturally of course, they're just a lot smaller. And with that, I'm probably going to call this video here. As always, a quick shout out to the Model Club members. A massive thanks to these guys on screen for the extra support they give the channel. If you'd like to join them or find out more about what becoming a Model Club member means and the exclusive perks you get, take a look at the links in the description. Of course, there are further ways to help support the channel if you'd like to do so, and again, full information is below the video. The best way to support the channel for free and see more content like this is by subscribing with notifications turned on so you never miss a modelling upload. Finally though, from me here on the workbench today, it's a massive thank you to you for watching this one, and I'll see you all again next time.